Azeroth, and welcome to episode 134 of the World of Goldcraft. I am your host, as usual, the Lazy Goldmaker of thelazygoldmaker.com. And as every week, I'm going to be talking about gold making related topics for about 20 minutes. If you're following along live, make sure you post your questions in the chat. And if you're not following along live and want to, you can do so at Twitch TV/LazyGoldmaker. And I record this on Wednesdays at about 2:30 p.m. Central European Summer Time. The podcast is made available by my patrons, and if you want to join us, you can do so at patreon.com/thelazygoldmaker. Now, this week I'm going to talk about something that came up on another auction house related or gold making related podcast, the Auction House podcast, with Sanserful and Jack the Dipper, which I've also been a guest on twice actually. They had an interview with a botter. They've had an interview with a botter before, but this time they got someone who had even more insight into the botting scene, and someone who in the past, when they lost their job, had actually been making their living from botting for a while and selling gold. So this was a very interesting insight into the world of botting. And I wanted to talk about some of the things that were mentioned and some of the things that they're often talked about in relation to botting and multi-boxing, and sort of discuss like what we learned. Now, the first thing I think that I'm going to talk about is the fact that this botter was talking about what he's currently doing, which he referred to as a small-scale operation that he's just doing for fun. And a small-scale botting operation done for fun means that you're botting 15 accounts. And with these accounts, he's farming materials in some of them. Then he's using a couple of accounts to craft materials. And then he's using some accounts to post those items to the auction house. So he's literally doing the entire value chain from like creating materials, crafting legendaries, which is one of the markets he's in, and then blasting them out onto the auction house and reposting them at an interval that a real player would never be able to match. Which is sort of discouraging. This is a small-scale botting operation, and it's something that would blow anything I've done out of the water completely, anything that any legitimate player can do out of the water. Since they have multiple farming accounts, their materials are effectively free. The only reason they want to craft is that they'll be able to sell more of their materials, move them more quickly, if they turn them into finished items. So this is probably one of the reasons why there's so low profit margins in crafting across the board, is that botters can do this. This is just one guy doing this on his free time, and he has made money, like real life money, being a botter in the past and selling gold. And he made about $100,000 a year doing that when he was heavy into that. And obviously there are tons of operations doing that as well. Guarantee you there are multiple websites selling all kinds of TOS breaking services in gold. And they're sure to run much more larger, much more professionally run bot farms. So that's just really sad. And then you have the fact that the new auction house that they added in BFA heavily favors automation. Since it's last in, first out, you always want to be the last one to post. So the more you can cancel scan, the more you can make. With the throttle, cancel scanning is now super slow. But if you have a dedicated auction house account that you're running a bot on, then you don't really care that much about the throttle. It'll just tell you to only focus on a couple of items to cancel scan. And yeah, it'll take time, but like you're not playing the game on that account anyway. It's just being automated, so it doesn't matter at all to you. Then to us regular players, that's going to be like hours out of our day to cancel scan if we want to compete with that. With the classic auction house, you can get around this to a certain degree, at least in some markets, because you can post in stack sizes. So with items like alchemy, for instance, you can just post in stacks of 5 and overcut and often get the sale. So that's one thing that was nice about the old auction house and gave you some outs against the people using automation. But the current functionality of the auction house is really, really heavily favors canceling and reposting as often as humanly possible, or in the case of the botters, as often as inhumanly possible. So that's sort of it. It was also interesting to hear that he focused a lot on optimizing for not being seen by other players, because one of the main ways that they got that botters get caught is if they get reported. That's the big way that they get caught. Enough reports. So every time you see a botter, report them. Outside of that, they apparently don't get caught often enough. And that's just a little bit sad, but that is the case. That is the case. So obviously it's very clear that he is generating a huge advantage, and probably a lot of other people are doing the same thing. And he even admitted, like, he's reading the WoW economy Reddit and other gold making content creators and following them to get ideas that he can then automate with his bots. So they're looking. They're probably botters have taken my ideas, or even taking my TSM groups for legendaries, and then just like crank down the profit margin and just blast them out on the auction house in quantities and repost volumes that's impossible to reach for normal players. Yeah, it's also very clear from the interview overall that Blizzard is not really dealing adequately with bots. And I think the most illuminating part of this is the fact that this guy got all 15 of his bot accounts recently banned. You know what he did? He turned around and he started 15 new accounts. That's what he did. And one of the reasons why this is so easy is obviously because of the token. Because as long as he didn't lose his main account, so presumably he was able to transfer the gold away from the bot accounts at the regular pace. And then if you have all the gold on your main account, you can just buy tokens, buy a bunch of tokens and gift the game. And if they can't touch his main account because his main account never actually cheated, then they're just going to be able to keep doing it. And the cost of setting up new accounts is apparently laughably low. And particularly when he could make, like, his goal is to make like 100 million in time for 9.1. And he's at like 71 million gold liquid and at that amount of gold, like it's super cheap, relatively speaking, to just buy 15 new accounts and get them running. They'll probably be generating gold. Like they use pet battling to level, because you can just stand in one place very out of the way and kill battle pets and level to max. They level to max in like an evening. You set it on, and then you go to sleep, and then the morning after you have a new fresh level 60. Or level 50 or whatever, and then you get them through level them probably maybe some other way through Shadowlands. I don't really know. But either way, they are back at it pretty much instantly. So that's discouraging. Like, the entire thing was actually very discouraging to me. It's like, why? I had that feeling of like, what's the point of doing gold making legitimately when it's apparently this easy to get back into it with botting? Like, why should I bother trying to work hard over a long period of time to get to 20 million, 30 million when you can get it in half the time, or a third of the time, or 10% of the time, even using bots, and it won't impact your main account at all? This guy has been a hardcore botter in the past, never been banned on his main account. I don't really know what to do about that, but it was a little bit discouraging overall. It's like, and particularly the fact that they're attacking, the bots have infiltrated pretty much every gold making method in the game. Because generally speaking, most gold making methods in this game are pretty simple. None of them require any large amount of player skills. Some of them require a little bit of thought process to find them when they're new. But actually executing them is very simple and obviously very easy to automate. So that's that. Of course, the multi-boxing ban, he thought that the multi-boxing ban was related to botting, and that it was really hard for Blizzard separate multi-boxers and botters, and I can probably believe that. Someone who would use a team of 5 bots farming the same area would probably look very similar to a team of 5 multi-boxing the same area. And that's also something I've talked about in the past. I think that the multi-boxing ban is in large part due to the fact that Blizzard wants to free up customer service resources. And tackling botting might be one of the things they could use those resources for, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. So there's that. Then what was I gonna say? Then you have, of course, bots are not just used for gold making. That was another interesting tidbit. In that the way they use the bots they use, you can also set up rotational bots that will play your character for you in terms of PvE and playing an absolutely hyper optimized PvE rotation. And you can just move around. As long as you keep your character out of the dangerous stuff on the ground, your character will execute its DPS rotation perfectly. And he didn't name it, but he did say that there's someone, presumably well known from one of like the top 2 guilds in the world, is what I got the vibe of when he talked about it. That is using one of these that's active in the closed communities of botting. And presumably used it for world first raiding, which is will obviously be a little bit extremely cheating and very, very, very bad for the world first race. He also knows that there's a lot of boosting communities that use these rotational bots to create a more consistent experience, to more consistently be able to deliver. Like if you're boosting Tired and Athreus for 6 hours straight, at the end of the night you might be a little bit tired, so if you have the rotational bots and you can just move around and dodge massacre and that's it, then that's obviously going to be nice for consistently and quickly offering fast boosts, which is very important for the boosting communities. So yeah. Next up, Classic versus Retail. So he said that generally speaking, there was a lot more bots in Classic. Just not that surprising, because there's no token in Classic. Which means that if you want to buy gold in Classic, you either have to like go through hoops and trade with people on Discord from Retail to Classic and buy a token, or you just go straight to the gold sellers and buy it for real money. And we all know that you're never going to remove the demand for gold. The demand for real money trading for gold is always going to be there. There will always be players who want to pay to remove some of the grind inherent in an MMO. That's just always going to be the case. So he expected a lot of bots in TBC. And I expect the same thing. There'll be a lot of botting. It'll be interesting to see how that rolls out and what the community backlash is. Honestly, like, I got a lot more mad at botters after listening to the episode and hearing him talk and hearing how easy and how strong it is. It really pissed me off. It really pissed me off because these people they're breaking the established rules of the game and generating a huge advantage doing so. That's not available for those of us who choose to follow the rules of the game, which is just discouraging. So that's that's really where I'm at. That's really where I'm at. Now, one thing he talked a little bit about this, and this is like sort of the ethics of botting and the effect on the game. And he had the same mindset that a lot of multi-boxers have also had. And that's that bots in some respect are good for the game, or multi-boxing is good for the game, because it increases the supply of materials and makes it cheaper for average players to pay for their herbs or consumables. And obviously, all else being equal, they're right that like if you allow botting, you're going to get more materials available for sale, and the price of materials are going to go down. But all else is not equal, because you also have to look at the side of resource generation. And we're talking resource generation now. We're talking about both like materials and raw gold. and how that's being generated and how that's distributed throughout the player population. Now, if you have widespread botting or widespread multiboxing, then a very large portion of both the liquid gold that's being generated and the materials being generated will be generated by botters and multiboxers. And a very small portion of the value wealth that's being generated will be generated by average Joe players. So even though, like, all else being equal, they'll be getting cheaper herbs, they'll also be sitting on a much smaller pie, much smaller part of the overall wealth of Warcraft. Whereas if you remove botting and you remove multiboxing completely and everyone can just farm with one character, then the amount of value that's being generated from farming with one single character is going to be a much larger portion of the total amount of items and gold available on a realm or in World of Warcraft. Which means that generally speaking, you'd expect people to be better off in an economy where no one can bot and no one can multibox. Because even though, like, the prices are just going to stabilize at whatever the average Joe players can support, but they'll now have a larger portion of the gold and value being generated, which is probably a lot more important than the specifics of, like, herb supply and demand. And also it's the fact that Blizzard can always tweak supply and demand for stuff like consumables. They've changed that in the past. In Legion, potions were very expensive. Eventually Blizzard nerfed the potion cost in terms of herbs to make it more affordable and more available to other players. And it's much easier to balance the economy if you know that everyone has access to one account and one character based farming. That's going to leave a much more even playing field in terms of resource generation and the ability to generate resources. And that's something that is easy to forget because you just think that more herbs means cheaper herbs means good for casuals, but that's not the entire thing. That's just not the entire thing, because there's also tons of other things botters do. They bot vendor shuffles and generate maybe a large portion of the raw gold that's being generated in the economy. And if 80% of the raw gold that's being generated is being generated by botters, then you're not going to keep up with inflation if you're just playing the game normally. So yeah, overall, I think that both multiboxers and botters to some extent have, like, underestimated this part of the effect that kind of gameplay has on the game. And I think it's pretty clear that it's hyper detrimental to allow botting. And essentially this guy's defensive botting was essentially just, I can do it, it makes me richer, I like it. Which is fine, but it's like he's breaking the rules. No way around that, and he's generating a huge advantage from breaking the rules. So hopefully he gets banned again. Now, that was about it I wanted to talk about on botting. Those were my initial thoughts. I just listened to the interview last night. So now I got a couple of questions in chat today, all of them from Dirty RB. So we'll get to those. Do you think we're in a period of inflation? And then a follow-up question, what's triggering it? Generally speaking, WoW at its most basic is inflationary. In the fact that if you just go out and do, like, your world quests or your callings or play the game in any way, you're going to generate more gold than you spend. Of course, if you go into raiding and start using consumables, then you might be spending more gold, but you'll be spending most of that gold on other players through consumables, and a very small portion of that on repair costs and other avenues of gold that's actually being taken out of the game. So World of Warcraft will generally always be inflationary, but changes to inflation and changes to the rate of gold generation has led to periods of deflation in the past. Like, there was a large deflation just after Legion because they removed the huge gold fountains of the Order Hall. So the early parts of BFA saw the prices of a lot of TCG battle pets drop for the first time in almost forever. But long term, I think that WoW is just at its base inflationary. and it needs to be, because otherwise newer players would never be able to catch up. So I think I haven't looked up prices in BF or in Shadowlands specifically to see like if we're more or less inflationary than BFA. But I think that in general, like the total amount of gold in the game is just monotonically increasing. For those of you who are on the math side of the spectrum, or generally speak, that just means that it's going upwards, always going upwards, the total gold in the game. The only thing that changes is how fast it's going upwards. That's generally speaking the only thing Blizzard has changed. The only thing that might throw a wrench in it this time around is the Orbial Shards that take a very large amount of gold out of the game. Like personally, I've already spent gold cap on Orbial Shards, and there are people who have done way more legendary crafting than me and spent way more. So if that's enough to balance it off, I don't know. But I think we're in inflation in general in WoW. And then Dirty Irby had another question with, do you think botting in retail is at its most prolific point in WoW history? Or was it more prevalent in the past? That's a question that I don't really know. Well, what we do know is that botting was super popular, apparently super popular in Classic and very popular in TBC. And it's hard to say. I think it depends on what type of botting. I used to know one of my real life friends, he had like the WoW Glider bot back in Classic and used it for leveling. And used Honor Buddy for farming. Back in like actual vanilla when we were all like high school students and didn't give a crap. Now I didn't do that personally. So I know that like some of these were quite widespread at some point. I do think that botting for gold making is probably at its most sophisticated in terms of like the strategies they employ, and like the scalingness. I'm pretty sure that the best botters are like at a completely different level right now compared to what it was back in the day. The overall prevalence of botting, I have no idea because I don't go. I never farm anything, so I don't ever see botters. And I'll just see them if they're standing around crafting, but I can't. I'm standing around crafting then. I don't often look at my monitor at the moment. So it's hard to say. I don't have any specific knowledge, but based on what this guy said, I guess it's pretty much as bad as it's ever been. Yeah. It seems as bad as it's ever been. And the obvious rewards for the people who bought are just through the roof. It's really bad. I really, really hope that Blizzard is planning to use some of the resources they must have freed up from not having to deal with multi-boxing reports to really combat bots, because I'm, as I said, super discouraged by hearing about what these guys are doing. But hey, it is what it is. Can't really control what other people are doing. But the rewards of like doing crafting in a botted economy is just not as large as they should be. So yeah. Either way, that leaves me at the end of the episode. So thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the show, then leave a like or a comment down below. Maybe there's something you'd want to hear me talk about. Then do let me know, and I'll be happy to talk about anything related to gold making that you guys think is interesting. We'll be back next week, and if you want to check out the show live, it's at twitch.tv/lazygoldmaker. You can also find it on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you find podcasts. It's the world of Goldcraft. And yeah, guys, have a profitable week, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.